An excerpt from the novel Deliverance. The scene is just before dawn in a wild stretch of North Georgia mountain river. The speaker is Ed Gentry, who has been a member of a party of 4 suburban Atlanta businessmen taking a trip down the river in 2 canoes. One of the canoes has apparently been ambushed by a mountain man, and one of the members of the party has been lost. The narrator is Ed Gentry, who has diagnosed the situation as one in which someone will have to climb up the side of a gorge below which the party and their one remaining canoe now is, and attempt to kill the mountain man who has sniped at them from the top of the cliff. Ed Gentry is now in a tree with a bow and arrow, waiting to ambush a man with a rifle. The needles were filling slowly with the beginnings of daylight, and the tree began to glow softly, shining the frail light held by the needles inward on me, and I felt as though I were giving it back outward. I kept looking down the tunnel, now not a mass darkness. There were greens. I opened my mouth so that my breathing would be more silent, so that a nostril would not whistle or drag with phlegm. I could see plainly now the needled and rocky space just beneath the tree, and out from that to the sandy shelf, maybe 10 feet wide, with its fringe of tall, ragged grass, and beyond that down into space, the eye falling like a body, not dying but coming to rest on the river. Bobby should be starting now. In a few minutes it would all be over. I would have been either wrong or right, and we would be dead or alive. Or maybe he had already started and slipped by me while I was looking for the arrow. There was no way to tell, and I cringed among the branches, waiting to hear a rifle shot from another place, a location I couldn't have guessed or known about. None came, though. The light strengthened. My sense of utter concealment began to die out of me and out of the tree. At the right angle, someone standing on the sandy shelf could look right up my tunnel of pine branches at me, and this could be either deliberate or by chance. A lot was hanging on chance. I moved cautiously as much as I could, like a creature who lived in a tree, craning my neck and leaning out from the trunk to see a foot or 2 more of the cliff edge, to see if I could make out the canoe. Something caught the tail of my left eye, and my stomach froze. I didn't turn my head at once, but slowly. I knew, though. I knew and knew. A rock clicked on another, and a man was walking forward onto the sand with a rifle. He had one hand in his right pocket. This is it, I thought. But my first hope, one I could not keep off me, was that I could stay in the tree until he went away. My climb up the cliff had left me. All I wanted was my life. Everything in me was shaking. I could not even have knocked the arrow. Then I looked downward and saw my hands holding the bow, with the broadhead's 2 colors, sharpened and unsharpened, separating from each other. This steadied me, and I began to believe once more that I would do what I had come to do in this kind of deadly charade. If he lay down with his back to me, I would shoot. I squeezed the first and middle fingers around the arrow nock, took a slow, open-mouthed breath, and leaned back tense and still. He was looking up the river and standing now with both hands on the gun, but with the attitude of holding it at his waist without necessarily thinking of raising it to his shoulder. There was something relaxed and enjoying in his body position, something primally graceful. I had never seen a more beautiful or convincing element of a design. I wanted to kill him just like that, and I prayed for Bobby to come into sight at that instant, but I could see nothing on the river, and he apparently couldn't either. He shifted around for some reason, with half of him framed by my tunnel of needles. "Wait till he lies down," I said far back in my throat, "and then hit him dead center of the back. Make it a problem. Try to break his back so that even if you don't hit the spine, you'll still hit something vital." But he was still standing there, not indecisively or decisively, just standing. Part of his body clear for a shot, but his head and the other part not. I had better try now. He may move out of my line of fire. I tensed my arm to see if the muscles would work. The string took on a small angle. I looked right at him, and he gave a little more of himself to the hole in the needles. He was sideways to me, but if his face came into view, he had only to raise it a little to be looking directly at me. I knew that my next battle would be with hysteria, the wild hysteria of full draw, of wanting to let the arrow go and get the tension of holding the bow out of the body, to get the shot off and get it over with. I began to set up in my head the whole delicate routine of making a good archery shot, all the time aware that the most perfect form goes for nothing if the release doesn't happen right. The fingers of the right hand must be relaxed, and above all, the bow arm must not move. He seemed puzzled. He kept looking back from the river down at his feet, at the ground there, half sand and half rock, and every time his head inclined and his hidden face bent down, he looked at a place farther from the river and nearer to where I was. I closed my eyes, took a slow 3/4 breath, held it, and leveled the bow inch by inch. When it was approximately in the position I wanted, I went to my muscles and drew. My back spread broader, drawing strength from the tree. The broad head came back to the bow face along the arrow rest, the unborn calf. It chattered there with the unnatural tension of my body and a sound that was a sound only to the nerves in the palm of my left hand. I pulled the barb of the arrow firmly against the bow and began checking things in the bow and the arrow and in my hands and arms and body like a countdown. He was just out of the frame of thread on the string, my peep sight. I had only to move the bow slightly for him to come into the peep sight, and the left-right problem, except possibly for the release, was solved. Martha's orange and the target were now threaded and framed. That left only elevation, always the main problem when shooting downward, and the release. The tip of the arrow appeared in my secondary vision as I looked at him to be about 6 inches under his feet, and I brought it down another inch or so until, as I judged, it looked to me as though I were trying to shoot him through the stomach. Looking through the string down the shaft and out the cave of needles, I could see the arrow as being in a plane extending through the middle of him. We were closed together, and the feeling of a peculiar kind of intimacy increased, for he was shut within a frame, all of my making, the peep sight in the alleyway of needles, and I knew then that I had him, if my right hand just relaxed and let the arrow tear itself away, and if my left arm did not move but just took up the shock of the vibrating bow. Everything was right. It could not have been better. My anchor was good and firm, and the broadhead seemed almost rock steady. I was full of the transfiguring power of full draw, the draw hysteria that is the ruination of some archers and the making of others who can conquer it and make it work for them. I was down to my last 2 points, and he was still right there, stooping a little but now facing me just a shade more than he had been. Then he moved, slightly but quickly, and I fought to hold on to the arrow. He stirred the ground once with his foot, and I saw his face, saw that he had a face for the first time. The whole careful structure of my shot began to come apart, and I struggled in my muscles and guts and heart to hold it together. His eyes were moving over the sand and rock faster and faster. They were coming. When they began to rise from the ground, they triggered my release. I never saw the arrow in the air, and I don't believe he did either, though he surely must have heard the bow twang. I had been at full draw so long that even in the instant of release, I believed that I would no more have been able to move my left arm than a statue would. I was afraid that my concentration had blown apart under the recognition that he knew where I was, and some of it had, but not all. The shot had been lined up correctly. If the left arm had held, he was hit. What happened next I was not sure about, and still am not. The tree thrummed like an axe had struck it, and the woods, so long quiet around me, were full of unbelievable sound. The next thing I knew, there was no tree with me anymore, nor any bow. A limb caught my leg and tried to tear it off me, and I was going down the trunk backwards and upside down, with many things touching and hitting upward at me with live weight like arms. To this day, I will contend that I spent part of the fall checking the fingers of my right hand to see if they were relaxed, had been relaxed when the shot went, and they were. I tried also to turn in the air so as not to strike on the back of my head, and was beginning to turn, I think, when I hit. Something went through me from behind, and I heard a rip like tearing a bedsheet. Another thing buckled and snapped under me, and I was out of breath on the ground, hurt badly somewhere as the gun went off again, and I could not get to my feet but clawed backward, dragging something. The gun boomed again, then again and again. A branch whipsawed in the tree, but higher than my head would have been if I'd been standing. There was something odd about the shooting. I could tell that even as I was, and I got to one knee and then to my feet from that, and crouched and crow-hopped toward, to, and finally behind some rocks on the upriver side of the tree. I stayed low. The gun went off again. Then I slowly lifted my head over the rock. He was staggering toward the tree, still 10 or 15 feet from it, trying to get the gun up as though it was something too long or too limber to raise like a hose. He fired again, but only a yard in front of his feet. The top of his chest was another color, and as he melted forward and down, I saw the arrow hanging down his back just below the neck. It was painted entirely red and was just hanging by the nock and flipping stiffly and softly. He got carefully down to his knees. Blood poured when his mouth opened and seemed to splash up out of the ground, to have the force of something coming out of the earth, a spring revealed when the right stone was moved. Die, I thought, my God, die, die.